it really does need to be more like compost. You're decomposing it and you're using it as fuel. Fuel for something new to come forward. It's as if the trash becomes the very nutrition that we need to grow.
Hey, it's Amy from Create Magic at Work. We all have parts of ourselves and experiences that once felt unwelcome, unsafe to express, or deeply misunderstood. So we buried them. We're about to go treasure hunting in the places you were taught to avoid. This episode is part of a special mini-series called Finding Treasures in the Trash, hosted by executive coach and creator of Inner Truth Work, Cari Jacobs-Crovetto. Cari brings decades of corporate leadership and deep spiritual practice to guide high-achieving, soul-seeking humans through the process of reclaiming the parts of themselves they've cast aside. Through raw conversations and profound truth work, each episode invites you to turn toward what you've disowned and begin integrating it back into the whole, beautiful human that you are. Because your treasure doesn't always live in the light. Sometimes it's buried in the trash. Grab your gloves, Cari, lead the way. Let's dig through this trash.
This is Cari Jacobs-Crovetto. Thank you so much for joining me on Finding Treasures in the Trash, a 12-episode mini-series nesting under Create Magic at Work. If you like what you hear, I'm offering you a special 5-day meditation series called 5 Days to Truth. It's the beginning practice of what we're talking about here on Finding Treasures in the Trash. You can also follow me on Instagram, or you can find me at my website, bravedirections.com. Thank you so much for listening. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Finding Treasures in the Trash with me. I'm Cari Jacobs-Crovetto. I first wanted to just thank everyone so much who sent me notes or comments on the introductory episode 1 with my dear friend, Amy Lynn Durham, and Create Magic at Work. I loved hearing your comments and I felt so supported, and I'm really happy to dive into episode 2. So in this episode, we're going to focus on what the heck is trash. I referred to the word trash in episode 1, and I thought it would just be good for us to dive a little bit into what I mean when I'm referring to trash. Essentially, this is shadow work to some degree. If you've never heard of shadow work, it's really about working intentionally on the parts of ourselves that maybe we've suppressed, or that we're embarrassed to show, or that we feel shame around. This could include things like anger, jealousy, envy, a lack of confidence, or even a feeling that deep down inside, you're better than other people or smarter than other people. That can be something that people are embarrassed to admit, but feel. Trash can also be experiences that we've suppressed or that we don't want to look at. For example, the loss of someone you love, like a parent or a child. It can also be experiences that we deny are happening in our lives today. Issues like drinking too much or escaping in technology, or even the ways that we avoid telling ourselves the truth. I playfully refer to this as our trash, but what I'm really trying to do is take the sting out of the idea of looking at the things that we don't like to see about ourselves. Shadow work is really based on the concept that we all have light things about us, superpowers we're proud of, parts of ourselves that we gleefully allow others to see. But also, every single one of us has a shadow side. Nobody gets out of here without that. These are things that sneak up on us, that live in hiding places, that we put there intentionally to either try to keep ourselves safe or keep ourselves from being fully seen in a negative light. The crazy thing about shadow work is that most people will see your shadow, even if you're not owning it yourself. So it's deep and important work to do. You've probably heard the quote, "The unexamined life is not worth living." I look at the process of continuously, consciously, and intentionally going inside to dig in your own trash as a way to make the unconscious conscious so that it can be healed, so that it can be integrated, and so that it can be worked with. When we don't examine with deep intent who we really are, it's still operating in the background. And the crazy thing is, people can feel it anyway. So I heard a recent shocking fact that our nervous system is firing off more messages from one nerve to the other than there are stars in the sky. That was just mind-blowing to me. I mean, if you think about looking up at the sky and seeing all those stars and imagine backing up and being able to see even more stars, it's fascinating and unfathomable. There is so much happening inside of each and every one of us. Thousands and thousands and thousands of messages being fired back and forth inside of just our one body. And imagine that that's happening inside of everyone all the time. And even though mentally we can't really grok or take in the amount of information that is being shared back and forth between two human beings because it's so vast. What's important to hear here is that it is happening, and people are reading you, and they may or may not know why they have a reaction to you. But sometimes that reaction could be living on such an unconscious level that we ourselves aren't even bringing into the light our own darkness, and so others are reacting to it unconsciously. I hope this is making sense. So when we hear about things about those people who have an ability to read things in other people, or maybe have very sharp intuition or a psychic ability, it's oftentimes that they're just more tuned in to what's happening when all of that information is firing and they can read it more easily. So this is what I mean by this opportunity to dig into your own trash, because people are going to feel it anyway. And they may or may not be able to describe it, but it may actually attune them and their nervous system either to lean forward into you, into connection, or backwards away from you. They might not know how to describe it, or they might not know the story in detail, but they are going to know that something's off, and they're going to fill in the blanks. So isn't it better if you take control of the narrative? Isn't it better if you're looking at yourself to define your shadow and then to integrate it into the total story of you without shame? When I think about digging into my own trash, it started many, many years ago when I was just 22 years old. I started having panic attacks, and the panic attacks were very severe. I often went to the emergency room, maybe sometimes 2 or 3 times a month. I was really begging with them to find out what was wrong with me. Remember that this was at a time before there were anti-anxiety medicines, or before people were even talking about mental health. It wasn't even common, really, to see a therapist. And there was no internet, so I couldn't look anything up. I just thought that I was going crazy. The panic attacks morphed, and I began to fantasize about harming myself or harming others. I definitely thought that I was losing it. And I was suffering in silence. I was just graduating from college. I seemingly looked great on the outside. I was primed. I had done 2 great internships in the field I wanted to be in marketing. And I had no idea what was happening. It forced me into what I now believe was a divine intervention to begin to look at what my own story was up until that point. I had come from a big, large Lebanese family in a small town where we had lots of influence. I told people that I had a great relationship with my mom and my dad. And this isn't to say that my mom and dad didn't do a lot of things right, but my mom was a prescription drug addict. She was borderline personality disorder or bipolar. They could never really diagnose her because the drugs were always in the way. She was often, and by often I mean most days, in bed suffering. And she was also a kleptomaniac. She taught me to steal for the first time when I was about 5 or 6 years old. It was a small fake diamond ring from our local drugstore. I remember feeling so conflicted as she asked me to put the ring on my finger and just walk out of the store. My dad was angry and scary. I think it was the only way that he knew how to handle or try to deal with the situation of my mom, by literally beating us all into submission. I was fortunate that years later, my dad had his own epiphany and he changed tremendously. And I was even more fortunate that we had a deeper relationship in my adult life. But at 22 years old, this all hadn't happened yet. And I was still blissfully living in a story that I had a great life as the panic attacks settled in and became more severe. I was forced to begin to inquiry as to what was happening to me. When all the doctors told me there was nothing wrong, I would lay on the floor, close my eyes, and drop into an imaginary world that I created to make myself feel safe. There were these chocolate rivers and rainbows and little elves. Looking back on it, it sounds a lot like Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which was one of my favorite movies of all time. And I guess maybe I created this safe place in the image of Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. But as I laid there, dropping down further and further, I began to ask myself, why do you feel so afraid? Why do you feel like you're going to die? Why are you so panicked? Why do you want to run or scream or hit something or hit yourself? And several answers emerged. The first one was, you don't know how to love right. I can still remember feeling that answer as it lingers, even today in my body, like I didn't know how to love right. I had been raised in an environment with a mother who was unable to offer me unconditional love due to her own pain and suffering. And I mimicked a lot of the behavior of a person with borderline personality disorder. And then there was the fear that I had suppressed, the fear that I never knew what life would be like when my father got home at night. All of this had been held down and trapped in my body for far longer than I was able to manage. And it was coming up in fear, panic, and anxiety. The idea that I didn't know how to love, that I didn't know how to be connected with other people in a healthy way, that was the beginning of me accepting my own shadow, of me allowing it in, digging in my own trash so that I could begin to heal. There were other answers that emerged along the way, and maybe I'll share those over the next 11 months. But this first moment, the first time that I intuitively ran this practice, has really become the backbone and the habit of how I have managed my life until this day. I'm now in my 50s, and this is what I would call an example of digging in the trash or of shadow work. The shadow that I was looking at was the lie I had been telling myself about what my childhood had been like. I wanted to tell myself I was a princess and that things were perfect. But the truth was really, really different. So when you're looking at your own shadow, it can be something that happened in childhood, but it also can be something that happened in our adult life. It can be social conditioning that's made you feel a lack of self-confidence. I know that my story is quite extreme, and I understand what that may feel like. I was once told by a colleague at Stanford that I like to drag people to the deep end of the pool. I think it's because I got so used to the deep end of the pool that it seems normal to me. But I understand that many people will have trash that isn't so extreme. For example, I have a client who is a chief marketing officer. He has made some of the most fascinating and most impactful and instrumental campaigns that you and I have probably seen in our everyday lives. To look at him on the outside, you would think he is confident, secure, and has it all together. But when faced with strong men or masculine archetypes who are dominant, he goes blank inside. This didn't come out because he shared it in a coaching session. It came up because he was having a hard time presenting his concepts and ideas in high-impact meetings. As we began to look at what was happening to him in the room, we uncovered that he had tremendous anxiety and low self-confidence. Trust me when I tell you, this isn't a guy who you would expect to have any confidence issues. And over the weeks, as we gained trust with each other, he began to share more about where that came from. It wasn't so much that he had any dramatic abuse in his life, but it was a way that he felt unseen by members of his family. His brothers and sisters were highly academic, while he was highly creative. He was a visionary, while they were book smart. This led him to feeling like he was never quite good enough, despite tremendous success. And so we were able to dive into his trash to see what that shadow was all about. When he was in positions where he needed to gain influence with other leaders, he would either overcompensate by coming up too harsh and too defensive or too rough, or he would undercompensate by shrinking. This is why it can be so important for us to examine our shadows or our trash in business, because it's coming through anyway. I would imagine that people who were in the room with him might have thought he was confident, as he should be because of the great successes that he had, or that maybe he was a jerk, or maybe his quietness was read as arrogance or smugness, when all the while my heart was breaking because he was suffering on the inside. He felt small, and he didn't feel like he fit in. This gave us an opportunity to unpack his life a little and look more deeply at how he could accept this part of himself that he pretended didn't exist, and for good reason. By pretending it didn't exist, he could create a false confidence. But it was false, a false sense of confidence that years later he can now more consciously own. He can more consciously track what's happening inside his system when he feels like he's shrinking or when he feels like he's overcompensating. This is why I named my podcast Finding Treasures in the Trash. If I hadn't had those panic attacks and been forced to look at the truth of my life, I would have never healed. I would have been debilitated by fear that I might die or feel stuffed down into my body in a way that created anxiety and in a way that made me want to run for my life. I would have never healed. I wouldn't known that, in fact, I didn't love right. I was loving conditionally, and I had a lot of bad habits that I learned from a bipolar mother about what loving someone looked like. I felt extremely unseen and extremely unloved, even though I had a really charismatic personality. And believe me when I tell you, I can talk, and I can talk a lot. So at times, what people saw on the outside didn't match what I was feeling on the inside. I had to learn how to unconditionally accept the part of myself that I didn't love. And that included loving my trash, every bit of it. And here's the thing about trash. You don't just dig around for it, integrate it, heal it, and then it's done. I wish it was that easy, but unfortunately, new trash likes to show up every day, and we don't have a recycling bin that we can just pop it in and make something new and pretend it never existed. It really does need to be more like compost. You're decomposing it and you're using it as fuel. Fuel for something new to come forward. It's as if the trash becomes the very nutrition that we need to grow. I'm hoping that by hearing two stories, one of my own and one of my clients, that you'll be inspired. I'm not saying this is easy work. It's why I call my company Brave Directions, because it takes a lot of courage to really dig in and look at yourself. When we talk about things like trauma or abuse, it's so easy for us to get lost in the story of becoming a victim to our own lives. I did that, believe me. I lived a lot of years as a victim. I was personally very aware of all the ways in which my own victimhood would thwart me. If I didn't look closely at my trash, take full accountability for where I am and where I was as an adult, even though the things that happened to me as a child were out of my control, it was important to me that I not linger there forever. It was important to me that I healed myself. It was important to me that I ended the pain that my mom and dad had endured so that I could have a different life. If you're ready and you want to continue the journey and learn more about the treasures that await you, that growth can happen. You have to make it a practice. If you put the practice of looking around for your shadow, of digging in your own trash, I promise that this can change your life. You kind of have to make it a lifelong commitment. But it's like the story of not wanting to look in the mirror. When we don't look in the mirror, we never really know what we truly look like. And so others can write that story. We can react by how other people's faces look when they see us. Or we can try to read what we look like by how people respond to our body language. But if we're willing to look deeply in the mirror of our own internal universe, we can come into deep contact of who we really are. We can begin to tap more deeply into the thousands of stars, the nervous system receptors that live inside of our body that are firing all the time. We can tap more deeply into the phenomena that exists when we're in deep meditation, the phenomena that we know there's something more happening here, that this just isn't about us, our work life, or our life, that there's something sacred and phenomenal and extraordinary that's happening just by being human. And that's the real invitation here. Imagine if everyone took on the practice of finding their own treasures in the trash. Imagine if we could show up and have conversations based on that level of vulnerability. I wonder what the world would be like. I wonder what communications would be like. I wonder what change could await the world. That's why I founded this podcast, and that's why I founded my company, Brave Directions, because I really believe that this practice of finding treasures in our trash has the potential for global change. So that's the real invitation here. On the surface, it can look like you're just digging around to perhaps see what you might have disowned, to see what trash you've thrown out because it's just too hard or scary to look at or deal with or accept. It's an opportunity for you to bring that forward and heal it, not just for yourself, but as a practice to heal the world. I'm so glad you're here. Stay tuned for a 10-minute meditation. Begin by finding a comfortable seat in a chair or on the floor. You can have your hands, one lying in the other in your lap, or you can have them resting gently on each knee. Your feet can be on the floor or they can be crossed at your ankles. One thing that I like to share about meditation is to go ahead and distend your stomach. It's a trick I learned years ago that if you allow your stomach muscles to release, almost like you're pretending you're pregnant, your spine can float more easily. This will relax you and allow you to have a straight seated position. Close your eyes and come into contact with both nostrils at the same time. Notice if the air on the inhale has a temperature. Notice if it has a sensation. Notice if you're moving your attention from one nostril to the other, and incline yourself to breathe through both nostrils simultaneously. This will help to balance your brain and your attention. On your next inhale, breathe in through both nostrils and allow the air to touch the back of your throat. Pay attention to just the small trip that the air is making from just before it hits the nostrils all the way to the back of the throat. On your next inhale, breathing in through both nostrils, touching the back of the throat, allowing the jaw to relax, the ears to relax on both sides of the head simultaneously. Breathing in through the nostrils, the back of the throat, this time pulling the air all the way down to the center of your chest, to your heart space. Continuing to breathe in this journey as you imagine the heart and the feeling of the heart living in your chest, surrounded by your protected rib cage. Guide your attention to feel the rib cage in a 360 circumference, including the back body and the front body. And just notice what's here. Perhaps there's a sensation, emotion, maybe even feels like stickiness or darkness. And you can just allow the breath to come into contact with anything that's here. Allowing the breath to perhaps bring some openness and ease. And if the mind wants to get involved and start telling stories or take you on little journeys about what you're finding, you can just tell the mind, that's okay, good job. Your job is to think. So you can just wait patiently over in that sweet little corner while I come back to my body and refocus your attention on the breath. On the next inhale, breathing in through the nose, past the back of the throat, down past the heart, and into the solar plexus. Again, just noticing what's here. This can be a place where anxiety lives, and if that's true for you, just breathe and accept there's no need to resist. We can allow anything that's here to be here just as it is. And continue just breathing into that space. On the next inhale, inhaling through the nose, the back of the throat, past the heart space, the solar plexus, and all the way down into your lower abdomen, as if you could sit comfortably inside your hips. Again, just noticing sensations, emotions, as we pour ourselves back into our bodies. We typically live anywhere from 5 to 20 feet out in front of ourselves at all times, divorced from what our body is really trying to tell us. On this next breath, in through the nostrils, the back of the throat, the heart space, the solar plexus, the abdomen, and continuing to pour yourself back down into your body, into your thighs, your knees, your calves, all the way down into your feet. As if you could feel all 10 toes from the inside out. As if you could feel the skin inside your feet from the inside out, anchoring down into your body for maybe the first time today, maybe the first time this week, maybe the first time ever. Consciously coming back to yourself. On the next inhale, making that trip again from the nostrils to the back of the throat, down past the heart space, solar plexus, lower abdomen, legs, all the way down to sit in the feet. This time inviting the arms and hands and fingers. And on the next 3 to 5 breaths, breathing as if you're breathing the entire skin of your body from the inside out, as if you're a giant balloon sitting down inside your own skin. 5 long, deep breaths. And at the end of the 5th breath, just noticing what it's like to be inside your body. This is the starting point for digging in your trash. This is the starting point of feeling safe in your body. This is the starting point for continuing. This is the starting point for a continuous question of how is it that I can more adequately reveal the truth of who I am to myself. And slowly bringing the attention to the back of the neck and allowing the eyes just to open a tiny bit. As you keep the attention on the back of the neck, this will help you to stay down and in your body. As you flutter the eyes completely open and return to present space and time in your room. I appreciate you so much being with me today. I offer you deep metta, which means loving kindness and magic.
I want to thank each and every one of you for coming back every week to listen to a new episode of Create Magic at Work and really helping to support and advocate for healthy leaders, workplaces, and lives for all of us. If you want any information on how to connect with me, click on the link in the show notes. You'll get access to all of the social media links for Create Magic at Work. Stay following along for more amazing episodes where we help you improve productivity and profitability in the workplace and decrease stress. Sending magic to everyone, and see you next time.